kind of Ed Grimley.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of That Early Childhood Nerd. I'm Heather Burnt Santee, and he is Richard Cohen.
Hello.
And he was muttering about something when I hit record, so I don't know if that will make it or not. But if it does, just know I don't know what it is. I didn't approve it beforehand. I don't know. All right, so Richard and I are going to talk about a revolution. Yeah. So we'll start with this, unless there's something you want to say about yourself. Do you need to add anything? Okay.
I'm just enjoying this glorious day sitting out. This is not a fake background.
It looks like a fake, beautiful background.
Backyard.
Yeah. This is a fake background.
If that's fake, that's sad.
I know. To cover up the real. No, that's my real husband's side of the office. Okay, so we're going to start with this quote by Angela Davis, and then we'll talk a little bit about Angela Davis, and then we'll jump in. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Angela Davis said, "You have to act as if it were possible to radically transform the world, and you have to do it all the time."
Hell yeah.
That hits that could be 17 different conversations, honestly, about where we are in the world right now, and with each other right now. But we're going to use it to talk about education. But first, let's talk about Angela Davis.
Yeah, I mean, people might be thinking she's not an early childhood person. Why is the nerd using Angela Davis?
Because she was a badass. She a badass.
Yep. For anyone who doesn't know Angela Davis, she was a revolutionary in the late 60s, early 70s. She was a massive feminist, but most importantly, were her battles for civil rights and race. She was a member of the Black Panther for a little while, and she scared people. Yeah. And of course, by people, I mean white people. Yeah. Because she was a revolutionary, and she had a lot to be angry about. And many people were too scared of the image of her to really hear the importance of her message. Yeah, I just saw a headline, and I think it was just from a couple of years ago, but someone had shared a story, and the headline was something like, "Angela Davis still believes we can change the world." Yep. So we talk about this history, and full disclosure, I had to look her up a little bit. I knew who she was, but not details. And Richard and I talked about it a little before we hit record. But it's not just that she was a revolutionary, she is still an activist and a scholar, and she's a professor, out there, still trying to radically transform the world, as this quote says. So in some ways, she's a hero of mine.
Yeah, I'll buy that. Yeah.
I mean, she was a pioneer. As a Black person, as a woman at that time, saying loudly what she said against, she defines countercultural for me, because she was, railing against predominant culture and saying, hey, this isn't working. And that just took guts I don't know that I'll ever have. Yeah. And so again, full disclosure, Richard and I had sort of talked about an idea for a recording, and then this quote came up like a meme on my Facebook, just sort of totally unrelated. And I thought that connected for me with what you had suggested we talk about. But then there was a minute where I was like, but wait, she was fighting like really big battles. She's fighting really important issues, and I don't know, can we connect that to early childhood? And I can't believe that thought even crossed my mind, because ECE, or childhood, I guess is what I want to say, is such an important, vital part of radically transforming the world for the children in the moment right now that we're working with. We can be trying to radically transform their world, but also if we're thinking about, going forward, we have an impact on the kind of future there is. And I'm not talking about the, $3 future return for every dollar we invest now. I'm talking about participating in a cultural change
by our relationships and our caring and our work with the children now.
Yeah, I would agree. I, I definitely see a connection between, and I don't mean to compare us to her.
No.
What she did was on such a large scale, on a
Right.
huge scale, and impacted
Right.
so many, and continues to. But she started with what she knew. She experienced her own inequities as a Black person, as a female, and spoke about it. And we start with what we know, and that's early childhood.
Yeah.
And in that sense, we're aligned with her.
Yeah. So what do you want to rail about first in terms of radically transforming children's world, our world with children?
Well, Heather, I'm glad you asked. I wasn't sure what to say if you hadn't asked that. No, so I just want to speak for a moment about kind of my journey in these last few years, really. Well, across my career, but especially these last few years, and how it led me to reaching out to you a couple of weeks ago about this particular podcast.
Yeah.
I know I'm going to risk going way back too far. I was born in 1960. No. No, I've been an early childhood professional for coming on 40 years. And I've learned so much and grown so much over that time, and come to understand the field that we're in, better with each passing year, and watched the field evolve and grow and change for the better and for the worse. We watched the influx of No Child Left Behind and what that meant for us, and how that led to our reliance on data gathering. And we've watched the rise of neurology and the nervous system, and how that has changed what we do in this field. We've watched the possible rise of universal pre-kindergarten and what that could mean for us, and the rise of standardization.
Yeah.
All of these things, we need to do other podcasts on all of this.
Yeah.
And then when COVID hit, that opened up a whole new sort of can of worms for our field. Massive challenges. And for me, it put me at home for 2 years, teaching college from my laptop. And it gave me time to connect with a whole different group of early childhood professionals than I had known before, starting with you.
Oh.
And that transformed my relationship with my profession. One of the things that one of the people you and I connected with early on was Carol Garboden Murray and Illuminating Care, her book.
Yeah.
And that really, it validated and gave words to what I had been thinking for so long about the value of care, and the craziness of, even yesterday, seeing people disagreeing online about the difference between preschool teachers and caregivers.
Jesus.
And blah, 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 and I've been hearing that for 40 years, but I didn't always have words for it until, and a way to focus it in my heart and in my communication, until Carol's book. And it sat with me now for a couple of years, that experience. And so then my thinking has continued to evolve, and here's where I'm at. And I feel like what I'm about to say is a revolutionary statement. And I think that's why you picked up upon Angela Davis's quote.
Yeah.
For so long, I've said, I'm an early childhood educator. I am an early childhood education professional. And then for a while after Carol's book, I added a C. I'm an early childhood care and education professional. But it's only recently that I sort of had this epiphany of like, why is the word education even in there? Right? We bow to the National Association for the Education of Young Children. We think that the be all and end all of our work with little human beings from birth through 5, 6, or even 8 is education. It's right there in our job title, and it's there in our national association. But it finally hit me earlier, and I'll frame it this way only because this is you and that early childhood nerd podcast. So here's how I'll say it. Fuck education. You know,
Yeah.
I don't understand. I started to think, why do we even care about education? Why is everything about education? And I started thinking, well, you know, there's a whole lot to unpack there around kindergarten readiness, our desire to be teachers and be paid as teachers, and somehow buying this line that our main job is to teach young children their colors, letters, numbers, and shapes, and a variety of other standardized skills, and measure them against those things and all that. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought education, you know, so let me go back and say, if you've ever been in one of my audiences for the last 30 years, you always hear me say that for me, the job of the early childhood professional is to help children make sense of the world in which they found themselves. That's it. And yes, the world happens to have letters and colors and numbers and shapes, so that becomes part of our job. But I never did it because my goal was to have them learn those things or to be ready for kindergarten, so I needed to focus on them. I did it because it's part of the world, and my job is to help them make sense of the world. So the more I think about this word education, there's part of me that still wants to embrace it, but to broaden its meaning.
Yeah. So one thing, I think childism is the reason we feel like we have to do all these things to
Tell people what
children,
that term
and
means.
we have to change them into something that we can recognize as valuable.
Right.
And one of the most observable things, two of the most observable things that we can change, quote unquote, about them is behavior and rote learning, right? Like we can see their behavior and we can see whether they can rote learn and repeat things to us. So that's what all of our work gets centered around too often. And I call that childism. But the other thing, so this is the other thing that what you just said reminded me of.
Wait, can we go back? Can you hold that thought?
Sure, sure. I got a note.
I want to ask you a question to flesh out what you just said.
Yeah. Okay.
So when I think of the word childism, to me, it's kind of like it's a subset of ageism, right? Which is a bias against and an oppression of people, a subset of people based on their age. So I want to come back to this term, childism. If you agree with my definition, in what way are children biased against or oppressed by the things you just described?
Well, I mean, most bias comes from, in my mind, I'm not an expert, but from what I have tried to learn over the last several years about bias, it's an assumption that other people are less than, or an assumption that to be right, to be valuable, you have to be like I am. And so I think so much of what we think of as education, as early childhood education, school readiness, that's not about the child and what the child needs, deserves, wants. That's about my view that children are only valuable when they meet certain standards. So it's part of standardization too. It's about adult views that children are deficits and can't be trusted to guide their own learning, make their own choices.
They're tabula rasas.
Yes,
right? They're blank
that
slates
whole
waiting for us
sponge
to
bullshit.
write on them. Yes, they're sponges waiting to soak us up.
Without
us, they would just be dry sponges.
Yeah. And I think in terms of oppression, and again, it's a word I, as a white woman, hesitate to use. But I think when we're talking about what I think of as childism, I mean, just a typical daily schedule in a childcare center to me, where we're scheduling out their whole day. We're choosing who they spend their days with.
Right.
We're choosing how long they can spend on what, each part of that day. We're choosing when they can meet their bodily needs. We're choosing what they can and can't do. And we're deciding what's important.
And we're choosing how they
for
meet their
them.
bodily needs, right?
Exactly,
If you're
right?
3, you've got to be potty trained in order to be in this preschool class.
Right.
You may not
Yeah.
be developmentally ready for it, but we're not here for your development. We're here for
Exactly.
group care.
Yeah.
And for you
Or
to be
it's
part of
clear
this
that
group,
you're
you've
not
got to hold it in.
sleepy, but I'm going to hold you on this cot and keep you on this cot and punish you if you get off this cot, because now is sleep time. Like, that's oppression in my mind. That's that's oppression for me.
And by the way, let me go back. And you said I hesitate as a white woman to use the word oppression, but females have been oppressed since the beginning of time in this patriarchal society.
There's
you
that.
you get to own the word oppression.
So let me say, as a white straight
group.
person, let me alter that a little
Okay,
bit.
I'm with you there then.
White cisgender. Yeah.
Yes. But yes, thank you for kind of helping me and
Got me all worked up now.
Good, because if we're going to be revolutionaries, you got to be worked up.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, but that was helpful, I think, hopefully for a lot of your listeners.
Yeah, it was helpful for me to be asked to extend that. So thank you.
Sure.
But the other thing I was going to say is that Dan Hodgins he and I used to sort of butt heads. Bless the man. Because he in kind of what you were saying, and I don't think that he was wrong. I think we were thinking about things differently, would say, why does it have to be learning? Why does it have to be, when we talk about what children are learning throughout their day and whatever they do, he said, why does it have to be learning? And I think what he was really saying was, why do we feel like we have to get our hands in it and make it about being educational? And for me, it's, we know children are learning all the time from every experience they have. And that fits for me with your description of your job being to help them make sense of the world they're in. So there is a role that we have in understanding what's important learning for that age, or what they're specifically individually trying to figure out. And it's just, I just think so arrogant for any adult to think, I know what all children at this level need. And I know when they're doing this, that this is what they're specifically learning. I know when we do group time and they sit quietly and I go through the calendar, I know that they're learning. But when they play, I'm not so sure whether they're learning. That's really just to burn some energy off so I can get them to focus for me later. There's a lot of adult ego that I revolt against.
Right.
Despite having being impacted by it myself all the time.
Yep, I hear you. And I appreciate your revolt. You're one of the most revolting people I know. Wait, that came out wrong.
Yeah, no, did it though?
Well, that's a whole.
Are you just hiding?
No, but what I will say is, one of the many threads in this tapestry or whatever is the greater education system, let's say here in America, right? Yeah. And for better or for worse, and I think you and I agree that it's worse, it's so deeply structured that you have to learn these things in kindergarten, or if not, you'll be behind for all the 100 things you have to learn in first grade, and on and on and on through college. And so then you have these early childhood people, like you and I were talking earlier about the subset of our field that are very powerful and wear suits and ties and, pearls, not the same people usually, up there in Washington, DC. And, I lived there for many years and I worked with those people. And so, bless their hearts. They want us to be viable, and somewhere along the way as a profession, and somewhere along the way, they bought into, oh, well, if the education system has all these things you have to learn, and therefore you have to learn these things by kindergarten, then early childhood education, has to then teach these 100 things.
Yep.
Otherwise, how will they be ready? And long before I had this sort of epiphany about this word education, which is really just a few weeks ago, I've always felt that our field, our gift to the world, is uniquely different than elementary and secondary education, and that it's dangerous and detrimental to compare what we do when we call ourselves quote unquote teachers with, and you've said this before on the show, with the people that we remember as teachers from elementary and onward. That was those folks who teach elementary school and middle school and high school have a very specific set of job skills and skills and knowledge and dispositions and experience. And even within that, the way to teach elementary education is completely different than high school education. But I want to shout it from the mountaintops even more than I always have for 40 years, which is what we do in this field for human beings in the first 5 years is a complete orange to those apples. We are not teachers. I've always said this, we're facilitators, but I never really understood that in the context of that word education and how toxic and poisonous it is to the world of young children and the people who serve them. We need to let go of that. We either need to expand that word education to just meaning welcome to life. Here's what it looks like. Here's how to get along with people and use your mind and use your heart. And yes, there's a lot of things that we need to learn, our motor skills and all those things. Sure. But I don't need to teach you any of those things. I need to follow your lead in the first 5 years of life anyway. What is it you need to take the next step in life? You need to be independent. I'm here for that. Let's do that. You want to cut with the scissors? Let's do it. I'm here for that. But that's different than the traditional way we think of that word education. And I am ready to let go of that. I'm very close to, my social media presence is called Zen and the Art of Early Childhood Education. And I'm very close to just, even though it won't have it has the same number of syllables as Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. So I've kept it.
Oh,
my original.
Sure.
Whatever. It's going to be just Zen and the Art of Early Childhood. Like, I don't even want to utter the E word anymore. Because while I understand its value, I live in a world where most people don't.
I definitely was one of the people who wanted to be called a teacher, who really clung to that early in my career. And as I, so it's what you said when you were talking about Carol's book earlier. The book came out and validated the shift that I had experienced myself across my time doing this work. And I don't like to use early childhood education, but I do it because it's what's understood by the audience that I'm usually talking to. And but I do that. I was just thinking the other day, like, about NACI, and when I used to get so much from them, and I sort of thought, well, NACI has changed, but I think I've just changed, and what I need from them is different. But the name itself, and you said, that it's for the education of young children. It's not for the children, it's for the education of the children. And I think that causes me so much discomfort. I know that causes me so much discomfort. I suggested in a curriculum committee meeting at work with other program chairs. The program that I chair is called Early Childhood Education. So there's times I have to use the word.
Me too.
But I suggested that, they were struggling with what to call the people who do this work. And I said, I've sort of been shifting to practitioners. While I'm not in love with that either, but I think for me, it's a little bit, a little bit different than educators or teachers. And several of them said, no, NACI uses the word educators, so we need to use the word educators. But do we? Like,
Well, let me give a little bit of backstory on that. I'm not an
yeah,
expert here, but
yeah,
I was a chief operating officer, I don't know, officer of the Council for Professional Recognition,
uh-huh.
who
The
administers
council.
the council that administers the Child Development Associate
Yeah,
credential.
yeah,
And they were spun off of NAEYC
right.
um, in the mid 70s for a particular purpose. And so, as fate would have it, I got to work with um, the two of the people that gave NAEYC its name back in the early 70s or late 60s and chose
Mm-hmm.
those letters and that name for this association.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, at that time, um, so much, my heart is so in this field, and my whole life has revolved around
Right. Me
this
too.
field, and I have such love for it and such
Mm-hmm.
pride in it.
Yes.
Um, and so I understand much of its history,
Yeah.
and it's always been this catch-up game, this be as good as game, um, to get the people taken care of, young children, and to get young children the respect that's accorded children kindergarten and older, and those
Mm-hmm.
professionals that serve them. We've been reaching for that for well over,
Mm-hmm.
for 50 years or more,
Yeah.
wanting that. And so that was part of where that name came from. The other part of that name came from a strong presence of people of color in the initial formation of NAEYC.
Uh-huh.
And they wanted those kids, they wanted to give them, the Head Start movement had started in 63. And many of the people who formed NAEYC were connected with that. And they wanted children of color to get resources and to get an equal start uh, in their, I don't even want to say in their education careers, because
Uh-huh.
that's what I no longer want to say.
Airplane?
All right, we have a motorcycle.
Oh, motorcycle. Even better.
We have so many motorcyclists in my little neighborhood.
That's
Jeez.
wild.
Yeah,
I live
yeah.
in a
My
circle
my
and we have
sound
a
diverse
motorcycle,
dog
but
is not happy about it.
oh, poor puppy.
Yeah, he is. Um, but anyway, that's where that phrase, the National Association for the Education of Young Children,
Mm-hmm.
that's where it started out,
Yeah.
was this wanting to be as good as, and wanting to make sure that a certain subset of kids got what they needed. And those are both noble
Sure.
goals.
Yeah.
But it's 2022, and we need to take a cold, hard look, just like our public education system, which is so messed up and so misdirected,
Mm-hmm.
needs a re-envisioning.
Yes.
So do we. And I'm taking a stand for it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm done with you know kneeling at the shrine of education and thinking that's the be all end all.
Mm-hmm.
Children, when they are with me and with any great early educator, they will learn to read and write and count and
Right.
all those things. They'll learn their names and their address, and they'll learn wonderful things like patterning and sequencing and predictions.
Mm-hmm.
I'm ready to let go of the word curriculum.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, unless everyone in the conversation agrees that it just means a knowledge of how children learn and a knowledge of how we can set that up, or provide for that, I guess is better what I want to say. But yeah, I have a hard time with that one too. It's I don't know. I think when we talk about curriculum, it's too easy to fall into packaged products,
Right.
which I guess I haven't been clear enough on the podcast about how much shit I think that is, because I keep getting emails from people wanting to come on the show and sell their curriculum packages.
Oh, you've been clear. They just
They
choose
just
to
aren't
ignore
really
you for
listening.
their own profit and power.
Yeah.
Because when
Yeah.
when you bring up the package curriculum, it's important for everyone listening. I just think in anything in this world, if you're trying to understand, so if you see something in the world and you think, wonder why that's happening, your
Yeah.
first step is to follow the money.
Yep.
Always. And then there's other ways you can look at it, but start
Mhm.
there. In a capitalist society,
Yeah.
start there.
Yeah.
And so it's important to, I think, for your listeners, for all of us to know that there are people who are profiting
Yeah.
from the word curriculum and the word education, and who benefit from those terms
Right.
being in place and powerful.
And I think I want to, this has been mentioned multiple times on the show too, but when we talk about curriculum, of course, the idea of it having to be evidence-based comes up. And it's really easy for a curriculum company to get evidence that, their product does what it says it's going to do. What people don't think about is that end goal important and valuable and appropriate? No one's including that in their research-based, evidence-based claims.
You lost me there. What do you
So
mean?
like zoophonics, for example,
Okay.
can say that they have evidence that children will be able to recognize all the letters after they learn this song and these animal names. But there's no conversation in there about whether a 3-year-old needs that yet.
Right.
Or whether it's appropriate to expect that. Even if you could get them to do it, is it appropriate? And is it fair? And
Amen.
is it childhood? And for me,
that's a tricky one.
That's also, is it what tricky? Childhood is tricky?
The meaning of childhood has changed many times over the centuries. There's
Sure.
no one right definition of it.
Sure, that's
I
true.
have mine, and I want to believe it's the right definition.
Right. Yeah, I tend to talk about childhood more often than I talk about early childhood settings or early childhood education, like when I'm talking to my students.
Right.
But yeah, it means for me something very specific, which is sort of freedom and play
and innocence to a certain extent.
Yeah, to a certain extent. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, that is an important piece to pull out of it.
Well, I saw a social media post yesterday that, again, bless their hearts, there's all these, the road to hell, and I feel like I'm getting more and more clear that we're there. Our field is there. And more so with these COVID years than anything else. My heart breaks for our fellow early childhood professionals. But in any case, I saw this social media post that was reminding people that now that you've learned about phonemic awareness and you know how important that is in early childhood, did you know about syntactic awareness?
I think that I may have seen the same post. Yeah, that sounds really familiar.
Well, and I had to look to see who posted it. And I'm like, an early child, it's something early childhood. I don't even know.
Yeah.
Yes, that's important for elementary school, right? But ages 0 through 4, maybe 5, that is not what we should be focusing on. If a child's ready for that, sure, I'm there for you.
Yeah.
You want to learn how to sound out words? You want to read? You want to write? I'm right there.
Let's do it. Yeah.
If that is not your interest, I am not going to carve out time every day to force that on you. That's not what the first 5 years are for.
Right. Right. Which is why I love the 0 to 3 critical competencies for infant toddler educators. There, I'll throw that in. Because they do. It's 0 to 3.
Oh, 0 to 3. I thought you were talking the ages, not the
No. That's that's one of their training curriculums.
0 to 3 is one of the great
train.
It remains one of the great organizations in our field.
Yeah. I mean, not just because I work for them now, but also just they do good stuff.
But I remember in my years in DC, and I would say to people, like in a whispered voice, I keep coming upon corruption in the field of early childhood education, and these weird, like, what is happening?
Surely not.
Like all these organizations, one after the other, because I worked for a few, and people would say, the best one here in DC is 0 to 3. They're the only ones that never got corrupted.
Yeah. Well, that's great.
Then I had to kind of really look at it and go, oh, I see that. I see in what they're putting out and how they structure their organization and how they live their values. Yeah. 0 to 3 is, I'm all about 0 to 3.
Okay, good. Now that we've put that commercial in there.
Yes.
Oh God. You might have to keep talking because I just forgot.
You were talking about that's why you love the competency standards, was because
it covers language literacy, it covers cognitive development and social and emotional development, but it's not focused on things to do to children. it's each piece has observable skills on the part of the adult that will sort of foster a child's development in those areas. So it's really focused on what do we know about development, and so then what kinds of adult behavior and knowledge can sort of support that. And it's not here's your dry sponge. Here are the things you need to fill it with, if that makes sense.
It does to me.
Yeah. So I feel like we could use more of that.
Well, and I think what I'm going to say connects to what you just said.
Even
I
if
think
it doesn't.
Okay. I think one of the problems we have is that we conflate standards, which I'll call academic standards, and developmental milestones,
right,
as being synonymous. And there is value in understanding typical child development and the milestones that are, are spread throughout it, so that we can identify if a child is not developing typically and either needs extra supports, either because they're quote unquote behind in their development, or because they're far ahead and we don't want them to be understimulated. Knowing developmental milestones is important for us, for the people in our field. But that's different than child should know how to follow a two-step direction by this age.
Yeah.
And they should know how to write their name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is sort of an example that I was just thinking about this the other day. So I used to work at Purdue with their speech language hearing department. And one of the things that I learned, that of course I had sort of intuitively had floating around, but one of the things that I learned is that developmentally speaking, from a development of speech sounds perspective, there are some sounds that we just don't expect until 4 or 5, and we don't consider it late or a delay until after that. And so then I started thinking about how we do literacy in early childhood settings, and we're focused so much on speech sounds when that's not a realistic expectation at some of the ages we're expecting it. Like I can't remember the details, but like if L is one of the later developing speech sounds, but we're expecting this 3-year-old and measuring this 3-year-old by how well they can make an ol sound when we hold up the L flashcard or the zoophonics animal, whatever that animal is. But we haven't taken into consideration that that's not even typically to be expected for some children until much later. It's sort of just, I was thinking about it in terms of the disconnect we have between standards and outcomes and sort of the developmental timelines that we have.
Right.
It would be like, it's like holding a 10-month-old baby up on his feet who hadn't shown any signs of standing alone yet, saying, well, in the toddler room, you have to walk. You can't move up to the toddler room till you can take 3 unassisted steps. So I'm going to hold you up and let you go until you do it, People would think that was ridiculous.
You in a jolly jumper for hours.
Well, that,
thinking, oh, you're vertical and your little feetsies are touching the ground. So I'm helping you get ready to walk.
Right. Without understanding anything about core development and spine development.
Right.
And just the typical path of supporting yourself in that position. But I don't know, for some reason, academically, physically, maybe we think, okay, yeah, that is sort of a silly expectation. But academically, it's harder to get people to stop and think, oh, okay, yeah.
Well, speaking of E words like education, I would put expectation in that same category. What is the value of me expecting things of young children? Isn't my job to invite rather than expect?
Yeah.
Like we can do phonemic awareness activities, fun ones that get them to practice the L sound.
Yeah.
But I don't have any expectation that they'll learn it. or that they have to learn it by a certain age.
Mm-hmm.
We're just playing. And right now we're playing with sounds. And yeah, I'm very well aware that that's a great foundational piece for their literacy development. But what I am like now committed to letting go of is not only education, but expectations.
Mm-hmm.
You're just showing up because your mom or dad made you be here and are paying to put you here while they go to work or
Right.
whatever, right?
Right.
You know, I have a job description and I'm a professional, so my boss does have expectations of me that I have to meet.
Uh-huh.
But I'm an adult and they're an adult, and okay, I can grasp that you have expectations for my job for me to get that money.
Uh-huh.
But that 2-year-old, they're just there because somebody put them there,
Yeah.
and now because they love me or they love you. But who am I to expect things of them, right?
Yeah.
No, my job
Yeah.
is to invite them on adventures, to follow them in their adventures, and I just take the leap of faith that all sorts of learning happens throughout all of that,
Mm-hmm.
and less of it happens if I try to control it based on my expectations.
Mm-hmm.
I'm done with it.
Yeah.
I'm done. I tell you, I'm done.
Okay.
This is my revolution. This is my
Perfect.
Angela Davis moment.
All right.
Now that
Okay.
doesn't sound good as a white person. I won't say that,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
it is
Yeah.
for me.
You
It
should be
feels
ashamed of
revolutionary.
yourself.
Putting aside Angela Davis,
Yeah.
it does feel revolutionary to
Mm-hmm.
say, no, after 40 years in this field, I'm done with the word education. I'm
Mm-hmm.
done with expectations. That is not what we're here for.
Mm-hmm.
Done.
All right.
We're here for caring. We're here for relationships. We're here for play,
Mm-hmm.
discovery.
Mm-hmm.
Everything I've learned and everything that I've studied in terms of the research says that's the most important things. Whether I care about the brain or whatever it is I care about, those are the things that give me the most bang for my buck.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's it.
And what's frustrating for me is though that all those things you mentioned, I'm 100% on board, but people, because we're good at euphemisms in our field, will take discovery and think, oh, well, that means learning, and so that means I have to teach or
Right.
play. Well, okay, but I'm still in charge, right? I can call it play because I, use teddy bear counters and a colorful mat instead
Right.
of a worksheet.
Play-based learning, fuck
Mhm.
play-based learning.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
You play, you learn, it'll all happen.
Yep.
But no, I'm not going to do my teddy bear counters and tell people, here we do play-based learning.
Yeah.
No, we just play and we trust that means they're going to learn.
Yeah. Have you ever seen kids use those counting bears
Sure, we
spontaneously
did all the time in my
as like a
classroom.
math kind of thing? I mean,
Yeah.
like I've only ever seen them come in as Play-Doh props or as things to pack and tote around or to drive around or to put in water, but I've never really seen any kids sit down with like the set that's on my shelf that has the little maps and the counting bears and things to like the discovery or the discount school supply kind of setup just sitting on my shelf.
Yes. Well, all these decades later, I'm still a giant proponent for interest areas or interest centers
Mm-hmm.
in a classroom. And I
Mm-hmm.
always had a math center.
Yeah.
And those bear counters sat there along with pattern cards to put those bears on, or
Uh-huh.
addition cards, right? Put 3 red ones here and 2 yellow ones. And how many then do you have as your total?
Yeah.
The difference is whole group and small or individual group.
And choice for me.
Right.
Yeah.
The autonomy of the
Yeah.
child. I had kids who wanted to go. So that meant that in circle time, before play around the room time or intercenter time, I said, hey, we got these bears here. And these are, I like to do this and I make patterns and I'm
Uh-huh.
learning about numbers too. And
Uh-huh.
it'll be over here if you want to do it.
Sure.
And there's always a subset of kids who want to do it in September and maybe some different ones in April.
Uh-huh.
But they choose it.
Yeah.
It's not me saying everyone sit down and use these bear cards.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm also still a proponent of interest areas for different reasons than, to prove learning or to, whatever.
Yeah.
That's a whole other episode probably. I have no idea how long we've been talking.
I think it's tomorrow. I don't know how long we've been talking.
All right. It's been a while.
Right.
So I think your declaration of being done can be a good stopping point.
I feel like this is how a lot of my dates end. Like all of a sudden the other person says, I think we've been here a long time.
This feels like a long time.
And then I never see them again. This is just, it's bringing back some traumatic memories.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. Well, you
It's
can
all
keep
right.
talking.
No, you look really different than all the men I've dated. So it's all right.
Okay, perfect.
Actually, not with that
I was
hair.
gonna say, I'll have to try harder. All right. This was
Just
very
up
fun.
with the revolution. Anyone who wants to join me.
Yeah.
And just let go of education and expectation. I'm here for it. And I'll yell it from the rooftops and you can come join me.
Yeah. That sounds great. Perfect. And that's another episode then of That Early Childhood Nerd. Thanks, Richard. This was fun.
You're welcome.
As always, kind of hope it gets canceled like all my recording sessions, but then once I'm here, I have a great time. So thanks for hanging in. I think we've tried to have this conversation 4 or 5 times since we
have. Thank you for not
scheduling.
canceling it. Finally.
No, like I said, I always
I know.
I go in hoping the other person cancels, and then I'm always glad they didn't.
Your nerd
all right.
self wins out. And
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's be done.
All right.
All right, bye everybody.